D&D and racism number 3, arguing in good faith. While I was aware that, as a matter of statistics, there would be racist D&D players, I did not have this solidly confirmed until I joined some D&D Facebook groups. When encountering such a person, I do wonder whether they are gamers who are racists who game, or merely trolls. Internet trolls, of course, not D&D trolls. Gamers who are racist are actual gamers. They just happen to also be racist. Racists who game, play, or pretend to play as a means of recruitment or to engage in racism, perhaps in these Facebook groups. This is analogous to the distinctions between video gamers who are racist and racist who are video gamers or video game. Now, it must be said that while right-wing hate groups do clearly recruit video gamers, there does seem to be no significant evidence or research into the use of tabletop games and the associated groups in such recruitment. So I'm not claiming that this is actually a thing, that there is a movement analogous to that in video games to recruit people. Fortunately, my discussion does not require that there be any racists who game who are engaged in recruitment, through D&D and other games. All that is needed is gamers who are racist. To show that they exist, unfortunately, one need only spend a little time on online groups dedicated to gaming. So one very easy way to summon some racists is to begin a discussion of Wizards of the Coast's, or Wizards' new approach to diversity in D&D. But surely there are some non-racists who disagree with aspects of this approach. Is it not hyperbole and a straw man to cast all critics of diversity in D&D as racist? Well, yes, this is a fair and excellent point. To simply assume that every critic is a racist would be to fall into bad reasoning. But the problem is this, is that while some racists, to their credit, I guess, do their racism openly, they're sincere, honest about their racism, others tend to prefer to use stealth. They advance arguments that seem reasonable and non-racist, while occasionally letting in a hint of racism show through by accident or design. But never so much that they cannot plausibly deny what they are doing is racist. There's also another problem here. The honest, non-racist critic and a stealthy racist will often advance the same sort of arguments. So then what is the difference other than the racism? The easy and obvious answer is this. The critic, the honest critic, is arguing in good faith, while the racist is arguing in bad faith. I don't claim to be the authoritative voice on good faith and bad faith in argumentation, and I do not insist that the account I'll provide is a necessary and sufficient definition. I'm not claiming to be the good faith, bad faith police, or paladin, I suppose, would be appropriate in this context. Rather, my objective is simply to start a discussion on good and bad faith reasoning, and as always in philosophical argumentation, people are invited, encouraged to advance counter-arguments against my account, kind of in the Socratic spirit. Now, as a philosopher, I'll start with the philosophical definition of an argument. In philosophy, an argument is a set of claims, one of which is supposed to be supported by the others. So there are two types of claims in an argument. The first type of claim is the conclusion. This is the claim that is supposed to be supported by the premises. A single argument has one and only one conclusion, although the conclusion of one argument can be reused and recycled as a premise in another argument. In the philosophy biz, we call this an extended argument. The second type of claim is, and I've already mentioned this, the premise. A premise is a claim given as evidence or reason for accepting the conclusion. Aside from obvious practical concerns, there is no limit to the number of premises in a single argument. When assessing any argument, there are two main factors to consider. One is the quality of the premises. Are they true, or at least plausible? Secondly, the quality of the reasoning. Is the logic good? And, get a bit technical, for deductive arguments, valid or invalid, for inductive arguments, strong or weak. Now, the objective of philosophical argumentation is to make a good argument, logically speaking, with true, or at least plausible premises. So roughly put, the goal of philosophy is to reach truth. Now, obviously, the goal of philosophy is itself a philosophical question, and this can, of course, be debated as well. People could argue that other objectives, for example, achieving power, success, or destroying people, would be the appropriate goal. Now, philosophical argumentation is thus different from persuasion, which is often the sort of argument people, think about when they think about arguing. The goal of persuasion is to get the audience to believe a claim, whether it is true or false. Now, as our good dead friend Aristotle noted, philosophical argumentation is very weak as a means of persuasion. Empty rhetoric and fallacies, and in philosophy a fallacy is a mistake in logic, these things have far greater psychological force, though of course they lack all logical force. So they do nothing logically, but they're very powerful persuasively. So now the stage is set to go on to good faith. The foundation of arguing good faith is the acceptance of the philosophical definition of argument. The goal is to provide plausible premises and good reasoning to reach the truth. This entails that the person must avoid intentionally committing fallacies, intentionally making false claims, and intentionally misusing rhetoric. A person can, of course, still employ persuasive techniques. Good faith does not require debating like the stereotypical robot or being dull as dust. But good faith argumentation precludes knowingly substituting rhetoric for reasons. Now, a person can, in good faith, argue badly and even unintentionally commit fallacies. That is to say, a person can make bad arguments in good faith. A person can obviously also make untrue claims when arguing in good faith, as long as these are errors rather than lies, and the person put in the effort to check their claims. And as long as they do this, they can still be arguing in good faith, because good faith doesn't require that one be omniscient and know everything and always say true things, but it does require not lying with intent, and again, doing the work, doing the research. Arguing in good faith also requires that a person be honest about whether they believe the claims they make and whether they believe the reasoning is good. Now, a person need not believe what they are arguing. A person can advance an argument they disagree with as part of a good faith discussion. How so? Well, as long as they're honest about it and say, I'm advancing this argument that's not my own, I don't think the argument's, one I accept, but as long as they're honest about it, that's fine. For example, when I'm doing philosophy, I routinely present arguments that oppose my own views, that I disagree with. And when I teach a philosophy class, my class is not, here is what I believe. My class is presenting, views other than my own, and philosophers that I disagree with. But I'm presenting them in good faith because I'm not trying to pretend that their beliefs are mine. I'm presenting other people's arguments, and I'm being honest about it. I'm saying this is someone's arguments. And so one can advance in good faith arguments one does not agree with, claims that one does not believe, but the key here is being honest about it. One must also be honest about one's goals when arguing from good faith. To illustrate, a critic of Wizard's planned diversity changes who believes that some of them will be detrimental to the game, and makes this clear, and this is what they believe, would be arguing in good faith. Now, a racist who argues against the proposed changes because of their racist values, and with the hope of luring people into real racism while concealing their true motives, would be arguing in bad faith. Now, as would be suspected, a clever racist will work hard to conceal their true motives when trying to radicalize the normies. There's also the possibility that a person is trolling about this. They have no actual, belief or commitment to, say, racism or whatever ism they're isming. But if someone is trolling with racism, it kind of does not matter that they are a troll. They're still doing the racist work for them. Now, while there are objective methods for sorting out the quality of arguments and the truth of claims, determining motives and thoughts can be problematic. Now, this is not to say that we can always just, distinguish good arguments from bad 100% of the time, distinguish truth 100% of the time. It's just that we do have methods of doing this. In the case of arguments, we have, for deductive arguments, we've got truth tables, Venn diagrams, and proofs. In the case of inductive arguments, we have standards of assessment. In the case of the truth of claims, we have, all the work in critical thinking, epistemology, and science, which is to say, our, toolbox is well stocked for dealing with this. Now, in the case of motives and thoughts, that can be more problematic. As such, while I can easily tell when someone is committing an ad hominem fallacy, just attacking someone and thus rejecting their claims, I obviously can't always tell when someone is engaged in bad faith argumentation, when they're being dishonest about their goals, etc. This lies more in the field of psychology than philosophy, discerning motives and intentions. An insight check, as we'd say in the D&D biz. However, sorting out motives and intents is something we do as people all the time. And we can often, but not always, divine a person's intent, their motives, from their actions and words. Again, not guaranteed, of course. But this is something we do. Now, we should always use due caution before accusing someone of arguing in bad faith. And this accusation certainly should not be used as a bad faith tactic itself. To use accusations of bad faith as a rhetorical device or an ad hominem would be bad faith argumentation and would, of course, prove nothing. But why should people argue in good faith? Why not just, bad faith it? Now, there are two broad reasons why people should do so. And these are arguments, reasons I'm advancing, and they, of course, can be argued against. The first is ethical. Arguing in good faith is being honest, and arguing in bad faith is often deceitful. Honesty is presumably intuitively good, dishonesty and deceit bad. Therefore, engaging in bad faith reasoning on these assumptions would be wrong. Now, obviously, ethics is a field of philosophy that can be debated, and one could counter this by arguing against honesty and in favor of deceit, perhaps using a utilitarian argument. The second reason is grounded in critical thinking. Bad faith argumentation generally involves bad logic, untruths, and a lack of clarity. As such, arguing in good faith would seem to be both ethical, the right thing to do, and rational, because good faith reasoning involves, at least attempting good logic, aiming at the truth, aiming at clarity, and that seems rational. It seems to be, in terms of critical thinking and logic, it achieves the goal of logic. So there are both ethical and rational reasons to argue in good faith. And bad faith argumentation, of course, is the opposite. It's bad and seemingly irrational. Why then, if it's bad and seemingly irrational, do people argue in bad faith? One reason is that bad faith reasoning can work. It works, or can work very well, as a means of persuading people. If one rejects truth as the goal, and instead focuses on winning, then bad faith argumentation would be the better choice. A second reason is that a person might risk harm, such as social backlash or criticism, for arguing their views in good faith. In such cases, hiding their view would be prudent. As a good example, a person who wants to get people to accept human rights in a dictatorship might argue in bad faith, hoping to Trojan horse people into accepting their views about human rights. Now, if they openly argue for human rights, they would risk, in such a dictatorship, being imprisoned or perhaps even killed. As an evil example, a racist might argue in bad faith, hoping to Trojan horse people into accepting their views. If they were openly racist in a D&D Facebook group, they would face censure and might be rightfully kicked out of the group. A third reason, which kind of ties into the second in terms of why people are doing it, is that bad faith reasoning can be used to lure people down a path they would not go if the path were honestly marked. So if someone leaped into a discussion about diversity in D&D and said, "Hey kids, follow me down this path to racism, let's go," most people would decline that option. But if someone paves the way with things that seem plausible, it's easier to lure people down that path. Now, such a use as the lure, the Trojan horse, does raise moral questions. Now, some might advance a utilitarian argument to defend its use for good. That, going back to the example of the person in the dictatorship, if they, Trojan horse people and they get them to accept human rights, you might say, the method's questionable, but end goal, good. Now, if someone uses, the Trojan horse to get people to racism, good people would tend to say methods, questionable, end goal, really bad. But again, this is philosophy, so all that stuff can be argued. If one can advance, an argument in defense of deceit, then, and it's a good argument, then it would be good, even though it would seem terrible morally. So the next video, I'll look at some arguments against some of Wizards' diversity policies that can be made in good or also, of course, in bad faith.